Hi everyone. Today I'd like to show you the SpringBoard Revision Assistant, which is available for some of the narrative and informative writing assessments that are part of SpringBoard. We all know that writing instruction is a challenge. Revising and editing drafts can be a time-consuming and complicated process. It may look different for each student and each writing task. In a perfect world, teachers would be able to provide frequent, individualized feedback as students continuously refine their writing. Unfortunately, there isn't always enough time to provide students with as much feedback as we'd like. Revision Assistant is designed to give students some of that feedback instantly at the click of a button. The program gives students both positive reinforcement and suggestions for improvement on all three dimensions of the SpringBoard writing rubrics: ideas, language, and structure. The interface is colorful and engaging, maybe not quite as entertaining as a video game, but the goal is to engage students and help them develop a growth mindset about writing. Revision Assistant is currently available on several of the SpringBoard embedded assessments. New prompts are being added each year, but as of January 2018, there are at least 2 embedded assessments per grade level for which Revision Assistant is available. To assign an embedded assessment using Revision Assistant, first locate the assessment in your bookshelf. I'm going to demonstrate the Grade 9, Unit 3, Embedded Assessment Number 2. Click on Table of Contents, find the correct unit, scroll down, and there's Embedded Assessment 2. In order to assign the embedded assessment to a class, make sure you're working from the class copy rather than the teacher copy. To make an assignment using Revision Assistant, click on the plus icon to schedule an assignment. You may choose either homework or in-class. I'm going to choose homework so my students have plenty of time to finish the assignment. The default is to assign to the entire class. Pick an appropriate due date. And most importantly, make sure you click the Turnitin Revision Assistant button so that this button turns blue. This means the Revision Assistant will be made available to your students when they access the assessment. Click Submit, and the assignment has now been assigned to your class. Now I'll show you what Revision Assistant looks like from the student's perspective. Now that I've assigned my writing assessment to my students, it's probably fastest for them to find it in their Calendar and Assignments tab. So I'll click on that button. I'm logged in as a student right now, of course. And as you can see, all of their homework assignments are listed here on the right. This is the one that I've just assigned, Unit 3, Embedded Assessment Number 2. One thing that's important to explain to your students is that they need to access the assessment through SpringBoard first. Click on the plus and then the A symbol. And some students may be tempted to write their answer in this large blank writing space. This is where they would ordinarily type a response for an embedded assessment in SpringBoard, but in this case, we don't want them to do that. Instead, we want the students to click this button that says Turnitin Revision Assistant. This will open a new tab in their browser, which will automatically log them into the Turnitin Revision Assistant website. They simply click the Get Started button, and they can then begin pre-writing. Blanks are provided for them to write a thesis, support, and conclusion. These are optional. When they click Keep Writing, they can then enter their essay and begin writing. To save time, I have copied and pasted a sample writing assessment from a fictional student that's incomplete. Whenever a student would like to receive feedback on his or her writing, they simply click the Signal Check button. Notice the Signal Check button will not work unless a specific number of words has been written. If students have not written enough, they will receive an error message encouraging them to write a little more. But this sample has several paragraphs of writing. So if I click Signal Check, there should be some feedback available to the student. As you can see, the feedback is quite low. 2 bars for ideas, 1 bar for language, and 1 bar for structure. If I click on ideas, I will get some overall feedback. And when I scroll through the writing, I will look for yellow highlights for specific feedback about specific parts of my essay. Notice that even though the score is still overall quite low, there is still some positive feedback. Some positive feedback is always included on each dimension, as well as corrections and suggestions for improvement. This helps foster a growth mindset. Suggestions for improvement are marked with red flags. Positive reinforcement is marked with green check marks. Students have the option of saying whether or not they took care of the task, whether or not they took care of the suggested revisions, and they can also help the artificial intelligence engine improve by telling it whether or not the feedback was helpful to them. After revisions have been completed, students can click on Signal Check another time and receive a new batch of feedback comments. Students can repeat this process as many times as they would like. Each time, the feedback will be stored, new draft will be saved into memory, and the student will receive a fresh set of feedback comments. Finally, I'd like to show you how you can monitor your students' progress through the revision assistant process. First, you'll need to locate their assessment kind of the same way that the students do by going to the bookshelf. And I'm going to pick a different assessment now that the students have already completed, at least partially. It's a grade 7, unit 2, embedded assessment number 2. Again, make sure you're not working from the teacher copy. You need to work from your class copy of SpringBoard. Click on the plus icon and then the letter A. And by the way, this is where you could leave an announcement for your class. But in this case, you want to click on the Turnitin Revision Assistant button here, much like the way that your students logged in to Revision Assistant when they started work. You'll get a slightly different login screen. This is what the teacher login screen looks like. If I click View Work, I'll be taken to the prompt and a couple of links to the rubric PDF and the learning standards. Students also can see this rubric PDF, by the way. It can be very helpful if you are using the embedded assessment rubrics that are built into SpringBoard. If I click on Student Progress, I can see that 3 of 8 students in my class have already turned in their assignments. If I click Download Assignment Report, it will download a Excel's formatted spreadsheet, which gives me some rubric scores and a status update of each student in the class. Notice that some of my students have completed and turned in their assessment. Those students are marked with green check marks. If I click on the green check mark, I can see their final essay that's been turned in with a timestamp. I can also see the feedback that Revision Assistant has given the student for this final draft. And if I scroll down to the bottom, I can see any preliminary drafts that the student ran a signal check on, along with all the feedback that was given to the student at that point. So if I want to, I can really construct step by step exactly what revisions the student made. This is very similar to the revision history that would be available in a Google Doc, but in this case, I also get the feedback that the program gave the student at each step. So I can assess whether or not the program is giving my students meaningful feedback. Notice some of the students don't have a green check mark. For example, Barbara Gordon does not have a green check mark, but she does have a blank checkbox here. That means that she has run at least one signal check on one of her drafts. In fact, now that I clicked on her name, I see that she has a draft 2, so she's actually already done 2 signal checks. Even though she has not turned in the assignment yet, she has hit signal check and gotten some feedback from the program, which I can review as the teacher at any time. If I want to move to the next student, I don't have to go back to the student list. I can use these buttons in the upper right-hand corner to move from student to student. And here's a student, for example, who has a very incomplete essay. Even though it's turned in, there is not very much there. So this might be a place where I would leave some commentary feedback and maybe ask her to continue work. By the way, students can continue to edit their work even after they have turned in their final draft, as long as the due date has not occurred, the due date and time, then they can continue working. Here's a student who did not start the assessment at all yet. Here's another, and there's another. We hope you've enjoyed this introduction to SpringBoard Revision Assistant. If you have more questions, please contact your EdTech specialists.